Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the League of Inches podcast, season reviews, right in the thick of things. We're getting through to the last few. Cronulla Sharkies are up at the moment. So myself, Trav, along for this one. The Sharkies finished the regular season in fourth position, 16 wins, 8 losses, and a plus 222 points differential. Obviously got bundled out the second last week of the competition to the Penrith Panthers. But managed to break that hoodoo of the finals curse, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But Trav, throw straight to you. And when I mentioned the Cronulla Sharks and obviously the 2024 season, what's some of the things that point out to you? How do you sort of, judge their season?
Yeah, good year. Very good year. They should be really happy about that. They finished top 4. I think by my quick analysis of data, I think they only had 3 weeks where they were outside of the top 4 all year. So they were a consistently good team at points in time, particularly early in the year. We were very high on the Sharks and how good they were and what they were doing. A potential premiership team, and it's funny, in other than the last couple of years, in any given year, the way that they played, the potential they had, their game style could have won them a premiership. It was only that you had 2 of the greatest teams going around that stopped them. So, yeah, a really good year. They should be really proud of that. That finals win was a really big moment, as you said. I really liked what they did. So 16 wins and 8 losses, but for points for 4, and as you said with the differential, points for 653. That's really good. That's 5th for the league, which is a really good points for, and points against 431. So their defense was really nice. It was the 3rd best points for differential conceded in the competition, which is elite level. So offensively and defensively, or attack and defense, however you want to talk it, they were really good. And as I said, compared to 2023, there was growth. In 2023, they finished 6th. They had 14 and 10, so 16-8. So 2 more wins, 2 less losses. They scored more points. They were 690 points for last year, and then had a 653 this year. And points against, their defense was way better. Defensively, they were 497 last year and 431 this year. So, there was growth across, and they've got a really good list and a good coach.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the weird way, and you already mentioned it, the way I want to talk about this, I guess, to start with is I feel like their season as a whole, we can break into 3. So they had the start of the year where they were, as you said, I remember having some chats about they're a serious contender in this competition. They're right up there with one of the elite teams of this competition. There's the middle patch where they really got hurt. They lost pretty much majority of games. They only won 1 in a patch of 5 losses and a bye included in there. So that was a really rough time for them, and they lost a lot of confidence. And then there was the back half where they started to come good again. They got a few of those key wins they needed to stay in the top 4 when there was a lot of pressure with them not even making the 8 at some points there with those losses adding up. So you rightly point out, and I want to start with it, the start of that year, and it felt like probably the first two and a bit months, they were, and this is a big call, but they were the team. They was the standouts. I think they were winning the comp at one stage as well there. And I remember at Magic Round, I was sitting there with Adam, one of the guys who do some of the podcasts with us as well. And we watched a team, and we noticed this a couple of times on the cameras and stuff, but seeing it live, such a unified club, and that all as one. They were always together. They were upping each other. They'll get each other pumped up. After that game, and they had that really good win at Magic Round, they were able to actually, they got together when the NRL was rushing teams to get off the field and things like that. They stayed there in the huddle. They made sure they spoke about things. They all went over to their fan group. Which a lot of teams didn't do. I noticed in Magic Round, they did. Every single player went and thanked them all for turning up. And that was when both me and Adam turned to each other. And we're not Sharks fans. We don't really have much of a say when it comes to the Sharks, but we go, this is a club that's doing some great things. And as, I guess, a Para fan at the time whose club wasn't doing those things, it really stood out. And we both said at the time, this is a club that's going places, and it looks like whether it's going to be this year or in 2 or 3 years' time, that they look like they're on path to win a competition. And that sort of was where the Sharks were holding themselves. That start of the year, Trav, it was remarkable run. They just kept winning. They were beating the Storm down in Melbourne without a lot of their star players. Like that was a very, very good run.
It was, yeah. And you've summed it up really well. Sorry, I don't really have much to add to it. It was a really good run, and Sharks fans should be really excited about the future of what's going to happen. I don't think they're good enough to win a premiership, but I think they're good enough to be contenders and be thereabouts, and that's good. You know, and you just never know. The luck of run and the luck of competition in physical sports is that injuries can play major parts of what happens, and you need to be there to have a chance, and they're definitely going to be there. And I think the coach has made a really big difference, and what he's been able to do and how he's adapted. There are big questions about what they do in the future, which we'll talk about coming up, which is on everyone's minds, and has been for a long time. But yeah, they won a final this year. They finished top 4. They lost to Penrith and they lost to Storm in the finals period. So, the 2 grand final teams. Let's not be disappointed by that, and let's not understate how good their year was.
100%. And then as like the mid-year, a number of losses there. We're about to unfold and unwrap why that was. There's a few little elements into that. Then the back half of the year, they started winning a few games that they needed to win to stay in touch. And then obviously that finals game, which we'll touch on a bit further down the track today as well on this podcast, which was obviously has been written about for a while now, not being able to beat those big teams and those big win those big games. They were able to do that this year, which is a huge step in the right direction. And again, on Trav's point, they're sort of improving year by year, and that was again one of those improvements that they needed to do this year. And they'll go and enter into next year with a lot of confidence, I think, off the back of obviously Cronulla Blake, who will arrive at the club as well. But we're talking about the midway point of the year, and Nico Hines is going to pop up in this chat probably straight away at the moment. And people out there might be listening going, oh, here we go, Nico bashing again. I'm just going to start off by saying this. One thing I really pride myself and this page on and what we do is we say it how it is. It's not bashing. It's just we'll say things. We're not afraid to say things. And we won't sugarcoat things. And that's something that I know a lot of people who listen to us always constantly message and appreciate, that we will be open and honest regarding whatever the situation is. And we might say some things that are harsh, but there's one thing for sure is that we all know that Nico Hines is a good player. There is a good footy player in there, but we'll call a spade a spade. And there was a lot of times this year where, look, he started the year really well. He started the year almost on fire, and it coincides with how well the Sharks were going. He then got injured. He then got the Origin call-up and that sort of thing. And again, we saw it last year. The Origin arena just knocks this bloke around, and it's almost at the point where, and it's a touchy subject, but if I'm the Sharks, I'm saying, please, 12 months of focus on us, please, because we can't afford this almost dead patch that happens with you for a month or two where and almost in a way, he just goes mentally AWOL. He just can't, and we all know what he does off the field. He's a massive advocate for the mental health game and all that sort of thing. He's one of the best men in the game, and we love him for it. But there's no doubt in my mind there's something mentally happens with him when it comes to these big games and this big stage where he sort of just goes missing, and he can't handle the backlash in a way if something doesn't go right for him. And unfortunately, that then he came back to clubland after his injuries, and he wasn't really the player again. I don't know where to go with this one, Trav, but what were your thoughts around the Hines season? I guess he's obviously the big man at the Sharkies. How he plays, we've seen, if you just go look back at results, plays a huge effect on how the Sharks go as well.
Yeah, so Hines' year this year is disappointing. Very disappointing. You don't sugarcoat that, as you said. It was disappointing, and he should be disappointed. The club should be disappointed. I think the club need to invest in him. And that's a funny thing to say because they have with money in terms of what they're going to put in his wallet. I think they need to invest in him in a whole other side of things, and that's his mental and emotional side of things and what they need to invest in. And I actually think that sports in general should do more around emotional intelligence and the psychology stuff. And they do, and players do, but you don't hear a lot of it in team sports. You do hear a fair bit in the AFL, and the Storm do a lot as well around with the Resilience Project and stuff like that. And the AFL do, but that's because the Resilience Project is based in Melbourne, and they do that. NRL's not You don't hear a lot around that sort of psychology stuff that I think really, really needs to pick up. I know in America they do major efforts and to put in a lot of time and resources into that side of the game, and it's a different world now. The world is different, and that has to be done, and he needs it. The other side of it, what I want to talk about is of how good Nico Hines is Nico Hines, as you said, is a wonderful man. He is an absolute wonderful man, and he is an absolutely wonderful role model for the Indigenous community and what he does. And it's mind-boggling what he does and how he provides for it. And sometimes it can be, and it's a bit of a happy tear in the eye around what he does and how he provides that sort of stuff. And that's why there's so much pressure on him. I think people are very harsh on him. And I think we are very harsh on him, particularly now because of him being a Dally M. I said this before, and I've said it again, and I'll say it again. He's that year that he had for the Dally M was, his first year that he was the playmaker, and the club set him up to be that. And, this year, I don't think he was really set up for it. I don't think he's set up in Origin to be that guy either. I think Origin lets him down in terms of how they, he seems to have to come in and be like the savior every time. Is this major injuries happen, so he's got to come in and play. And he's got to be this savior, and he's not that type of guy. He's not that player, and he's not that. He's a very good dude. And he's a very good player in the right situations, in the right moments. And I think people have let him down too many times, and will continue to let him down. But I still think the club needs to figure out some emotional demons and what they do to settle him down. Club needs to figure out better how to manage him and how to help him and set him up for success, because he is a freaking good player. And if they want to take the next step in terms of grand finals and stuff, well, the closest thing to grand finals is Origin. And right. So, in my opinion, you want to be saying, go and play Origin, but here's what we've done to help you. And then hopefully Origin turns around and says, well, this is what we're doing to support you and help you too, because there needs to be that. And there needs to be some ownership, not just for Nico Hines about being able to play better, but there needs to be some ownership from a few people.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's a funny one because I don't know where to go with this one, because I don't want to be too harsh, but then we look at the back end of the year and we talk about they've taken steps forward. If I look back at the finals games, and yet you did mention they lost to both the grand finalists, which is a respectable achievement in itself. They got the win over the Cowboys, but I felt like a lot of those games it was Trindle who stepped up, and Trindle who was making the big plays. And again, it was Nico Hines sort of the backseat, and everyone was waiting for him to pick up the moment and take the moment with both hands and make one of those big plays, which unfortunately comes with the price tag. Like, this is one of the big things that comes back to this. It's not just pressure on Nico for a Dally M year and things like that, and whether people think he deserves that or not, but it's the price tag. And that's unfortunately the pressure that comes with signing these deals as players. And you've got to set yourself up for the future and your family and that sort of thing. But this is unwarranted or unwanted pressure that then becomes part of your game. That when he was at the Storm, he didn't have any sort of pressure because he wasn't on the money. He was a backup dancer to basically Pappy, and then came in and it was basically a free ride because he was filling in at the time and became this awesome elite sort of player overnight. And then now he's got the pressure of not just being that, but leading a team because of the halfback position. I don't think he's a halfback. I've said that a number of times throughout the couple of years. Even in his Dally M year, people think I'm crazy. I don't think he's a halfback. I think he's a 5'8". There he can play a bit more of that natural sort of fullback role. And to be honest with you, depending on what they do with Will Kennedy in the future, he could even go back to that fullback role at some point. And that's where I think he needs to be playing. He can't be a controller. It affects his game too much. He's a natural footy player. He can just pick moments, be sort of like those Tommy Turbos and the Pappies and that sort of player where you strike and away you go. Don't give him the organisation, because I think he's shown time and time again now it doesn't suit his style of play. It's not him. Stop putting that onto him. If you want the best out of him for his price tag, play him in a position that works best for him. And towards the back end of the year, I know Trindle was, for mine, the player that helped the Sharkies get to where they did, and he played and had those big moments. But that's because he's a halfback. That's his natural position. It's a pretty simple solution, in my opinion, this offseason. Trindle's your halfback. Hines is your 5'8". We'll talk about a bit more of that dilemma that happened this year when you add Atkinson to the mix as well. But are you with me there, Trav, in terms of him as a halfback? Do you see it? Do you think he's a halfback? Do you think it's a different position that needs to happen with him that we started to see towards the back end of this year?
Yeah, 100%. I don't agree that he's a halfback. Yeah, he won Dally M. He was set up for that, and he was really good. Let's not understate that. Whether you deserve it or not, you've got to get the votes, and the votes are what they are. We can't argue that.
It's a system.
It's right. He doesn't have to play. He doesn't have to be the best player of the year to win a Dally M. Like, he's just got to get the most votes in each game. It doesn't make you the best player. But I think he deserved it that year. I thought he was great. But that's my opinion. I don't think he is. I think Atkinson, so you want to talk about Atkinson, but I think it's time to talk about him now. Here's what I would do. I would put Trindle and say, the team's yours. You show what you've done. And, well, they just paid him. So it's his team. I'll put Atkinson at 5'8". I think he'd be really good as a 5'8". Atkinson's kicking game will make up for Trindle's. I don't think Trindle's a great kicker. I think he can, but he's not a great kicker. And I think Atkinson is a good kicker. So I think that he can steer that ship and do really well. I like Kennedy. I do. I like him. It's got to be harsh. I think he's got a spot in another team. But I don't think he's a good fullback. I think he's an okay one, and he's not the worst one, but he's mediocre. And when you've got Hines there, I think that's your fullback straight away, isn't it? Like, so I think they go Trindle into Atkinson with Hines at fullback and set up. The other thing I would consider too is I actually think Hines would be a pretty good centre too. Now, obviously, he's paid well and truly away from that, but he would, in my opinion, he would be a really good center. So, I think there's options here to set him up to succeed, and I think there's an opportunity here. And what I hope I don't see is come round one next year and Hines is in halfback. Like, I really don't. I really hope that and that would be an absolute travesty if that is what happens, because we all know where he's at and what they've done. And I think big calls need to be made. And they need to sit down and say, as a club, this is where I think we're best. Come on for the ride.
Yeah, and it seems a bit crazy. It feels like, in a way, we're leaning a bit towards the 2025 stuff, but it comes back to the dilemma that was these halves and this spine sort of makeup this year. And we already said that it felt like it was a good year. It was an improved year from the Sharks, which is all they want. But again, for mine, it's got to the stage where the Sharkies don't want to keep improving just to improve. They want to become that elite team. And these are some of the stepping stones that needs to happen to become that elite team. They've got some players there that I think they can achieve with that. Their hooker's sorted. Brayley is an awesome player and can consistently do the job for 80 minutes week to week. There is no doubt about that. Now it's about the halves, because this year, and it was funny, like we talk about that midway period, but let's not forget, and we'll talk about it in a second, the Trindle, what happened there, that incident, and how much that impacted the club, which, looking back, him being the chief organizer in a way and Nico sort of going a bit AWOL in that season, they missed that. They missed that a lot in those games. But Atkinson stepped up. As I said, the Stats Melbourne game continues to stick out in my mind and just how good he played. And anytime Atkinson was given one of those, either that 6 or 7 jersey, he killed it. He killed it this year. And that adds a lot more unwanted pressure, I guess, for Nico. But it also becomes a welcome headache for Fitzy, because then it shows you've got literally 3 players there that can do the job. They've shown they can do a job. It's just about balancing that up. And I know what you're saying about Will Kenny, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but it feels like, in a way, and I hope this makes sense to a lot of people, he's become one of those players where I think he's like for a bottom 6 team, he'd be the ideal fullback, because he's just he's a stock standard fullback. He won't make the mistakes. He'll just get the job done. But to be an elite team, I don't think he's the right man to be the fullback for one of those elite teams. You need one of those special guys. You need one of those guys that can do the job. And they've got one there potentially. They've got Nico, who can be that. We've seen him be that in the past. So it's an interesting one. I think he's out of contract at the end of this year, so it'll be interesting to see how they balance that up. And again, there is those rumors floating around about Pappy as well, depending on what he does, and might be a fit there. Who knows? But that's a lot of money all of a sudden in 2 or 3 guys at that club. And I don't know if that's salary cap wise, if that balances up. But yeah, the dilemma seems to consistently be there. We know it's been there, and I guess we'll move on from that and just see what happens this off season to break that. One player, we want to give a few player shout-outs when we do this. Britton Okora, I thought he was huge this year as the edge back rower and has really come on in terms of I'd have him classed as an elite back rower now. I think he's that good. He's probably the best hole-running back rower in the competition. He just knows how to run the line and does it so well. He's just, for mine, Trav, like, as I said, he's in that top elite category, and that combination he builds up with, I think it was Nico for a lot of the year, and just that time that they've got there on that edge, it's sensational.
Yeah, I love him. I think, and he certainly has made himself an elite player. I agree with you. He's not the echelon elite though. Like, he's not your top three, but he's certainly a top 5, 6, and that's no scrub. He was really good. I think he had a slow start to the year. And I mean, even this is not a Supercoach podcast, but I think the Supercoach way sort of showed how good his year was. No one really saw Nicker until about midway through the year or origin period in that element. And I think that was the same in terms of how we played. We didn't really see a lot from him until then. He had 25 appearances. I mean, for a second row forward, for his 2RF, like, he's 10 tries, 11 line breaks, 12 line break assists, had 25 offloads for a running 2RF who's not a big, like, he's not your traditional big 2RF. To 942 tackles at 90%. So for what he has to do and the work that he does, like, that's really good. And that, I think for him to take his next level, I think he needs to be more of that ball playing guy. Like, he needs to get more runs. I think he needs to be up around the 110, 120 meters and not at the 89 meters that he averages a game. If he can get to that 110, 120, that'll take him to that next level, which will also carry that Sharks team. So yeah, I really like him. He's got some improvements still to go, as I said, but yeah, he's there.
Yeah, 100%. And then you've also got, sort of, for mine, some workers. Like, you got your Cam McInnes's, you got your your Blake Brayley, who we've already mentioned this before. He's just one of those. He'll be there for years to come. He'll do the job very, very well. And in a way, he sort of just started to have a bit more of an attacking side of his game, which I thought was missing for a couple of years now. And this year, that sort of, he's been able to free up his game somewhat as a dummy half and really work into that. Cronulla Blake's a welcome addition. We'll talk about that now, season previews in a couple of months' time. We won't get too much into that. I mentioned it before. Obviously, the big talking point, and I guess it's all happened now, but we'll still tread carefully with how we talk about this, was the Trindle incident, how that happened midway through the year. Obviously did what he did stuff that was illegal, did the wrong thing, just did things in the wrong for being a clubman, and that time of the year as well for the Cronulla Sharks. And they really missed it. They definitely missed his leadership on the field, but in a way, it helped him come back and become the leader and the player that we've now seen from Trindle as well. It was a seriously disappointing time, I guess. As a Sharks fan, they would have felt really let down from what happened there. But it was a dark time, but it also helped create what he is now, Trav, in a weird way.
Yeah, look, I don't have any sympathy for it.
Yeah.
Like, I actually think he should have been a hell of a lot more punished than he was.
So do
I. So I have zero sympathy for him. And in my opinion, I actually think he's very, very lucky he's even been considered and has been considered, or that we even read his name this year. To me, in my opinion, that's like, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no.
Because I've got
I agree.
I'm pretty heavily on that with the other ones like Mitchell, Adokar, like it. Yeah, I just don't have time for that shit anymore, and I've had a gut full of it. So I think he's very lucky. But in terms of playing, yeah, you've had your chance. He's obviously learnt from it. He's gone and taken his second chance. He's realized that he was pretty freaking lucky, and the way he came out and obviously took it on the chin and went, "Yep, boys, here I am. Though I've learned from this, and I'm going to come and be your leader." And off I go. And he's just been paid for it. So, yeah, good on him. He's turned it around, and I think he's the next level, and he should be their halfback next year in terms of now that it's all done and dusted, and he deserves that. And yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it.
I know what you're saying. I definitely agree. I think that punishment should have been a lot harsher, and it probably would have deterred what we've seen at the end of this season as well, because the NRL would have come down a lot harder, and the club as well. I felt like the club may have let him off in a way. But yeah, that's sort of, we will leave that one there when it comes to Braden Trindle and sort of how the impact was.
Can I jump on a player before? I'm not sure where you were going to go next. Have you got a list of players you were going to go?
No, that was pretty much it.
I want to give a shout out to one fella, right? When you look at him, you think he's you just look at him and you go, geez, you're just a big ass meathead, right? Just a big ass meathead with, and you look at him, you think you've got no skill. You're not. But far out, he was good this year and he really made it. I'm not sure if you can guess who I'm talking about. No, Hazelton. I want to give a shout out to Hazelton. Yeah. He was huge this year, man. He was huge. 25 appearances, 7 tries, 36 tackle breaks, 10 hit-ups a game. Post-contact meters, 800. So 798.6 is just wicked. 96% tackle efficiency at 658 tackles made. I just wanted to give him a shout out. He really deserves it. I found it hard not to pick him as my player of the year for that team, but I think I'm going to surprise you with who I pick. I was going to put him down as a surprise packet of the year, but you'll see what I do with that one too. But I just wanted to give him a shout out because he was really, really good this year, and I'm really keen to see what he does next year as he has another proper preseason and how AFB really affects him. And how AFB changes the makeup of that group. But yeah, shout out to Hazelton.
And I think it was a timely hit to form, or hit the stage, because there's been a bit of question marks around their middles for a couple of years now, where a lot of them have been the similar sort of players and not really game breakers. They can't open a game up and terrify opposition forward packs. They just sort of get the job done, and they've had too many of those, I guess, for a couple of years now. And Tommy Hazelton came along this year and was that sort of difference maker in a way. And he had that patch where he came off the bench and was so good. Then they tried to push him into the starting role. Maybe a bit of fatigue for first sort of year playing proper minutes and stuff got to him. And then he came back to the bench for the back couple of games. And again, he went back into that terrorizing sort of figure. So interesting how they counter that next year, whether it is starting with AFB or if that's goes to that bench side of things, but we'll see what happens there, and very excited to see what happens when it comes to that. Got anything else before we go on to the question side of things, Trav, for the Sharks?
I'll end on a bit of a positive, but you can probably take this either way. This was a really good positive year. They won a final, which they hadn't won in a long time. They've got a really balanced roster. And if I look at it, I think, to be honest, other than Nico, I reckon everyone in that team can go, I had a really good year. I played really well. I think the coach can turn around and say, I coached really well. And there's a couple of things I can see as an improvement, but based off the way, hindsight's a wonderful thing, right? We're at the end of the year. I could have done this better. I could have done that better. But I think at the time, and with what had to happen, I think the decisions were made that they kind of got pressure to on what they did. And I think you can sit there and go through that whole team. Every single player can hold their head up. I can't go through a Melbourne Storm and say that for everyone at Melbourne Storm, or any other team. I think for the Sharks, though, their balanced roster, I think they achieved literally everything they could this year. And I think everyone in that team should be, really, really positive with what they've done.
Yeah, and it makes these questions, I guess, interesting because there's a few options and answers for each one of those, and we'll get into it. Everyone knows by now what we do. So the key moment of the year, mixed up, I'll go first. I don't know when the moment was. This is a hard one for me to answer, but whenever they've realised and made it sort of it's us against them sort of mentality that the club had was the best thing that they've done. As I mentioned, being there live for Magic Round and seeing it, they did against the Storm down there in Melbourne. That early sort of initial period where it was so much of them against the rest of the competition, it suited the Sharks so well. And I hope they continue on with that mantra and keep going with it because it's exactly what I feel like that playing group. It drives them very, very well. And it just brought out a different side of this Sharks team that we've seen for a couple of years now under the Fitzy era and working at his coaching style. This is it. Bottle that up and continue to run with it because it's working. Trav?
Yeah. Yeah, agree with that. I think that was a really good point. Key moment, I've got two. I think it's easy to talk about the key moment of being winning a final. I think that has to be a really key moment because that's what they build on for the next couple of years. They build on that. We've won one. We need to move forward. So I said that, but then my other key moment is a statement, which is answered with a couple of players, is next man up mentality that I saw this year. And I think the Sharks really took on that mentality that the Storm and Penrith have really, really honed in on. Next man up mentality. Dan Atkinson's come in and played really well. I thought Trindle became a playmaker when he kind of had to. In all honesty, we talk about Hughes and what he had to do because he had to. Trindle freaking had to. They dropped Atkinson, Hughes got injured, and then all of his mental demons and stuff like that, he had to, and he's became that. Just that next man up. There's a few other things that you can, next man up with Hazelton. Next man up, I thought Stone Street was really good when he came in. Obviously, he'll miss next year, but he was really good. Just that next man up mentality was a key moment this year.
Yeah, no, definitely. Who was your prize packet of the year?
To me, I was really, and I spoke about this with Hazelton. I thought he was really surprising in how good his year this year was. But my actual surprise packet was Iro. His year this year was enormous, and I had no thoughts that he would do that. I had no idea who he was. I picked him on Supercoach because I saw so many people have him, and I had no idea. And I thought, I'll pick him. I'll go with the pack, right? I had no idea preseason wise. I had only heard little bits and pieces about him, blah blah blah. But God damn, he was so consistent throughout the year. And then during the second half of the year, when he finally started getting attacking stats, he was a freaking beast. So he came out of nowhere for me, and it was a surprise.
Yeah, I went Tommy Hazelton just because I feel like it's been a big hole there at that Sharks and that club for a couple of years now with their forward pack, as I've mentioned a bit earlier. And he was just a breath of fresh air. He adds that element of something a bit different to that pack that they need. And I'm really keen to see how much they can evolve that and use that as their advantage moving forward. Who needs a big 2025?
I've got the Cronulla Sharks need to have a big 2025. So that's a funny one to say, but here's what they need to figure out. And we've said this, they have to figure out what they do and make some big decisions this year. If they really want to take their game and their step and their organization to the next level, that entire team needs to make big decisions. They've been very lucky they were able to go and get AFB, and he's going to make a big world of difference for that entire team. But the big 2025 has to be what the coaching staff do and what the organization does in terms of their player management and how they play with what they do with Nico Hines. And there's got to be some big decisions. And these are going to be decisions that are going to really piss people off and piss and others going to love, right? But they have to be able to make it if they want to take themselves to the next level. That's what they've got to do. And how they do it is up to them. But yeah, that to me, I'm not going to call the player on this. I'm going to call that entire organization because they've got some really, really big choices to do over this preseason, and they need to be doing it now. It's 14th of November. They need to be doing this now as they're about to step into their preseason before Christmas.
100%. For mine, I went Braden Trindle because I just think after what we've spoken about, obviously hugely disappointing what he did this year and impacted their season quite a lot. And some of those losses that they had, they probably would have had if he was there. I just feel like he owes the club a lot. And we talk about players and what they actually owe. He definitely owes this club now a lot. And they've given him the contract. They've rewarded his, end of season form, rightly so. It's up to him now to show that club that he's thankful. He owes them. He's apologetic about what he did this year, not just as a club person, but as a man and as a person and as a family man. He has a huge bit of pressure on him, I think, for next year, and he needs to continue to step up and continue that form that he's had at the back end of this year. Player of the year, I went Blake Brayley. I just think he is very, very consistent this year. Deserves a bit of. He doesn't get raps because obviously you got the Hines, you had the Trindle that happened, you had Wilkin at the back that gets his plaudits or gets his criticisms. You get obviously Atkinson who came on and played well. You get the Cam McInnes, all that sort of thing. But I just think he was there. The 9 played majority of the year, every minute, that sort of thing. He's just consistent. And as I said, I was really impressed with the attacking side of his game that is really brought forward this year. And I just thought he deserves a a good bit of rap there. So I'll give mine to Brayley.
I love that call, man. I'm really high on Blake Brayley. He's not your, sexy sort of, player that we can all just sit down and watch and go, geez, I really enjoy watching him. He's probably not one that you really will get highlight. You won't get highlights from. He's just that dude who plays hooker, but he plays it so well. He's played 103 games in a row, bro. Like that's just that. He's just a workhorse. He's played 103 games in a row. He had 27 appearances this year. Obviously, he scored 3 tries. He's had 8 try assists, 5 line break assists, 8 offloads, 1,108 tackles at a 94%. Like he's just I love him. I really like watching him. He's just your workhorse bloke. He's your perfect leader for your team. When he needs to do something, he will do it. When he disappears, it's not because he can't find his place. It's because he sees where he has to go. As the hooker, I'll pass it here and then I'll just sit there and I'll let that happen. Or if I have to run, I will. He doesn't have a bad game. Like he just doesn't. He's so good. I really, really like him. And for those in Supercoach, I'm going to start him as my hooker next year. But and then player of the year, I'm going to start him because I'm sick of paying big dollars on all these other guys. I just want someone who's going to sit there all year. But my player of the year, I went Eero. How fun is that? I went Eero. 10 line breaks for the year, 102 tackle busts for the year, 160 running meters on average per game, 90% defensive efficiency, got 6 tries. To me, he was the player of the year. And I think that's really funny. I've said that as a rookie, but he was just immense this year. And I really like what he did.
100%. That is it. That is it for the Cronulla Sharkies. I hope you've enjoyed it. Yeah, hit the like button, give us some love on social media, all that jazz. You know what to do by now. And again, hope you enjoyed the episode. We will catch you again very, very shortly.